We're just waiting for Ward here. He's just signing in here, I think, right now.
From the public. Oh. Yeah. You got it? Okay.
Hey, Ward, just let us know if you can hear us.
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can. Good to go.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the help.
All right, I think we're ready to go. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The TNRD acknowledges that we connect with many First Nations communities across our vast regional district, and today we're located on the Kamloops, the Secwepemc territory, situated within the unceded ancestral lands of the Secwepemc Nation. The TNRD appreciates the partnership that we have with the Kamloops, the Secwepemc, and respect the territory and the land on which we gather today. I'd like to pass it over to our corporate officer, Ms. Campbell, for the election of both chair and vice chair.
Thank you. As this is the first meeting of the Regional Solid Waste Committee, we will need to elect a chair and a vice chair. So nominations will be called 3 times. As candidates are nominated, they will be asked if they consent to the nomination. Nominations will then be closed. If there's only one consenting candidate, that candidate will be acclaimed chair or vice chair. If there are 2 or more consenting candidates, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to say a few words if they wish before ballots are distributed. I will now call for nominations for the position of chair of the Regional Solid Waste Committee. Director Stamer, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Second call for nominations for the office of chair. Third and final call for nominations for the office of chair. I declare the nominations closed. Director Stamer has been acclaimed to the position of chair. Congratulations, Director Stamer. Same process
Thanks.
for the
Thanks,
election. Sorry, Director Stamer.
Yeah, thanks very much. Sorry, we got a delay. Thanks very much.
We'll now call for nominations for the position of vice chair. Someone would like to nominate the director. Director Smith, do you consent to the nomination? Then maybe you can not, you.
Easily convinced.
Director Onzo, do you accept the nomination? Great. Second call for nominations for the office of vice chair. Third and final call for nominations for the office of vice chair. I declare the nominations closed. Director Onzo has been acclaimed to the office of vice chair. You only have to step in if Director Stamer is not available, so you're all good.
Unfortunately, he's Director Stamer, or I'm sorry, Chair Stamer, how would you like to move forward with the meeting agenda?
I would like to offer up vice chair Uso to
Chair the meeting.
run the meeting on my behalf, because it's impossible to do it down here. So if
Yeah,
that
sure.
would happen,
Yeah.
if that could happen, that would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
We will help you. We will help you. We'll help you.
And then you ask for all those in favor.
All those in favor? Any opposed?
Carried.
Thank you, Vice Chair Onzo. Okay, good morning, everyone. So since this is the first meeting of this committee, we thought I would give a little bit of a background of our solid waste service, as well as just cover the terms of reference for this committee. So I'm not going to read all this. This is basically cut and paste from the terms of reference, but just to cover what the mandate of this committee is. Providing assistance to the board of directors and senior staff in any ongoing operations and development of the regional solid waste management plan. Providing assistance in senior and direction to senior staff on strategic development of the solid waste management services. And we'll, I guess I'll stop there and clarify. We have the solid waste management plan implementation, which we'll talk about in details of. Those are kind of our priorities moving forward in terms of waste reduction and future goals. And then we have our ongoing operations, and that's why we separated those out in to clarify two different mandates. Make recommendations to the board on policy related issues related to both the plan and our ongoing operations, and to make recommendations to the board on policy issues that are referred to this committee by the board, and to consider advice provided by the Plan Monitoring Advisory Committee. And I'll talk about that committee in a moment, of what that committee is and what they do. So the membership, as we see here, it's the five electoral area directors, 3 directors from small municipalities, and 1 from a large municipality. As I think most people know, the Regional Solid Waste Service is a service that includes all electoral areas, as well as 10 municipalities, but Kamloops is excluded. But however, we still have a member from Kamloops on this committee. The reason being that even though Kamloops isn't part of the operational side of our solid waste service, Kamloops is included in our regional solid waste management plan. So policies related to the plan, for example, our mandatory recyclables bylaw, that also applies to the city of Kamloops, even though they're not part of the operation of our solid waste service. And the reason they're not part of the operation of the solid waste service is they fully fund their own system of collection as well as the landfill that they own and operate. Terms of appointment are 2 years. And staff support, you're going to be seeing a lot of myself, Adriana and Curran here, which I'll introduce in a moment. And any other staff that we may bring in sort of as needed or special presentations. So any questions on this committee before I move on? Okay, solid waste service. So this is actually a slide taken from the orientation that we did in November. First off, regional districts are responsible for solid waste management that is regulated by the province. So even though municipalities, Kamloops being an example, does run their own landfill and has their own solid waste system, they're not required to operate a landfill. It's regional districts that are required for end disposal of solid waste generated from within that regional district. Regional districts are required to have solid waste management plans, and that's the guiding document for policy and operations. And again, so even City of Kamloops having their separate operations, all of their all of their operations are included under that umbrella of the TNRD's plan. Part of that solid waste management plan is a requirement to have what's called a plan monitoring advisory committee. So I mentioned that in the terms of reference. So for clarity, that is not this committee. There's actually very specific guidelines from the province of who sits on that committee in terms of representation. So we have a separate committee that meets usually twice a year. And the role of that committee is essentially to act as well as the title implies, monitoring. So we are accountable to that committee to keep them updated on the activities of the implementation of the plan. And then recommendations or suggestions from that committee can go up to this regional solid waste committee that can ultimately make recommendations to the board. Now the chair of this committee is automatically appointed to that plan monitoring advisory committee. So there's that crossover between the elected officials and that plan monitoring advisory committee, which is made up more of sort of regional representatives within different expertise on solid waste. All right. Switching gears a bit, brief history on our solid waste service. I thought it's important to cover this off. So the 30-second history is before 1990s, generally speaking, out in the TNRD and most of rural BC, local community dumps, some were permitted through the Ministry of Environment, some were operated by the Ministry of Environment, some were unregulated, permitted, and I'm sure many of you can remember those local dumps out there. And the interesting history is whether or not they were even existing on the Ministry of Environment sort of list of permitted facilities or not. Many of them were not. So what happened in the mid-90s is that the province legislated that regional districts were responsible for solid waste management. So it moved from the Ministry of Environment's sort of problem to manage these dumps and landfills around the region to regional districts. So at that point, the TNRD moved to close a bunch of these small landfills and dumps. And the reason I sort of say landfills and dumps is those are different things. When I talk about a landfill, we're talking about an engineered design facility. A dump is really just that, a location where historically garbage was dumped. So in the mid-90s, we went out and closed dozens of these facilities. And when I say closed, it was a fairly simple process of pushing dirt over the garbage and planting trees, making sure we sort of contained that garbage where it was and replaced it with our transfer stations. And at that time, it was simply a single or a double garbage bin, unattended, unregulated, but the garbage would go into the bin and then the bin would get hauled to a larger landfill instead of being placed in the ground in those locations. The next big change came in 2008 when we adopted our second regional solid waste management plan, which was a major shift where we implemented a couple big things: region-wide recycling, the user pay system, where we actually started charging disposal fees. And then it was kind of the next wave of closures. So we closed the medium-sized landfills like Barrier, Clearwater, Logan Lake, and replaced those with larger transfer stations that we called eco depots. And we'll talk about sort of the difference in service levels at those different sites later on this morning. That was also a time where we increased staffing at the regional district for solid waste. So pre-2008, there was 3 staff in the solid waste department, and then following 2008, they basically doubled the staff contingent because the responsibility and work involved. Moving on, a little bit of an overview of our department. So this is where we're at today. We have 9 full-time staff in the solid waste department. So Adriana Mayu on my right here, she is manager of the department. She's been with the TNRD for 14 years. Yeah. Yeah, and both Adriana and I started in the solid waste department shortly after that 2008 plan was adopted, as part of that kind of wave of hiring that happened. And Curran Krinick is our operations supervisor. He's been with us for 5 years. Wow, time flies. And he has a long history and experience with solid waste, came to us from experience in Alberta as well as his time here with us. And you'll be hearing from both of them this morning. Also, we have about 80 frontline staff that aren't our direct staff. They're contracted employees, but I just want to kind of give them a shout out and recognize that even though they don't work directly for us, they are representatives of the TNRD. So whether they're driving garbage trucks or hauling bins around or collecting payment at the waste scale, we recognize that these are definitely kind of the face of the TNRD for a lot of our residents. So our solid waste services, as I mentioned, includes all 10 EAs and 10 municipalities and funds the operation of 27 recycling and disposal facilities. Adriana will get into this in more detail, the 3 different classifications of transfer stations, eco depots, and landfills. And actually in the report in front of you, we break that down even further when we start talking about service levels. In addition to those services, we have some electoral area specific services in area J and area B for curbside collection. So for clarity, those are additional services not funded from the regional solid waste service. Those are electoral area services that pay, there's a separate service, separate taxation they pay to fund the collection of garbage and recycling. In addition to all those operations, we also have a waste reduction program, and this is kind of a key part of our solid waste management plan. So including things like backyard composting promotion. We have just general waste reduction education and promotion program where we're at community events, we're school groups. You'll hear our radio and media ads kind of ongoing throughout the year. That includes participation in groups like the BC Product Stewardship Council, which is a group of local government regional district representatives, where we work kind of, how do I say this, alongside the province and to basically comment and critique provincial legislation and how it impacts operations, as well as the stewardship groups who are implementing programs like Recycle BC and like the Tire Stewardship Council. So this is our way as local governments to sort of provide feedback to the province from the local government point of view instead of from industry point of view about how those are working. We also work directly with municipalities and First Nations on specific waste reduction efforts and work towards implementing the regional solid waste management plan. very high level on the budget side. We're about $10 million in operating budget. And then separate from those two curbside collection services are area B is about 120,000 a year and area J is 350,000. So something to note is that this is funded, the top line there, the regional solid waste service is funded roughly 30% from revenue, like disposal fees and service agreements, and then the other 70% is funded through taxation. So this is kind of my last slide here, and I'll open up for questions, but I'm wanting to put this up kind of as a segue into the next agenda item. So, and back to the context of this committee, the purpose of this committee, as we talked about, is to make recommendations to the board on things related to solid waste. So historically, we have come to this committee for many kind of operational service level and policy changes. So examples including closure of facilities, changes to hours of operation, locations of new facilities like with the Boston Flats Eco Depot near Cache Creek, new or expanded services like when we signed on to Recycle BC, which is a significant operational change, new capital projects planned, bylaws like our mandatory recyclables bylaw was vetted through this committee, disposal fees when we revisit and set our disposal fees. All of that level of detail is discussed at this committee. So segueing into our next agenda item, what we're doing here today, and the reason we called this special committee meeting was to, I should say special additional committee meeting, was to get this new committee to discuss these service levels. And for the first time, we've actually put that all into one document, which is the document you have in front of you. And the reason we're doing this now is because our current operations and maintenance contract that operates all 27 of those facilities, including the landfills, is ending in June. And so we're about to go out to tender for those services once again. So the tender process will be led by staff, but what we want this committee to consider is to, first of all, understand the level of service that we're currently providing and have that discussion if there's any significant changes in that service level. I guess to be blunt, now would be the time that we would change those service levels because we're about to go out to tender. But the way we've structured this and what we're going to spend a bunch of time on is explaining our current service levels, and Adrienne and Karen will walk us through sort of item by item what those service levels are, and we can have discussion and debate about that. What we're ultimately recommending is maintaining the status quo of our current service levels, and then we would go out and procure that in the coming months to award a contract. I think I'll leave it at that, open up to questions on that.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned to me, Jamie, at the opening of the Ashcroft Eco Depot, that this was one of the largest, if not the largest single contract that the TNRD enters into. I can't remember how many years you said that, but it's a pretty significant contract that we're contemplating. So I guess we better get it right.
Absolutely. It's biggest contract and the biggest single kind of budget item in most of the service areas as well. Sorry, the term of the contract is 5 years. So the reason, and that's the maximum amount as per legislation that we can enter into a contract. And we've always had that maximum term, mainly because we recognize that, the investment of the contractor in terms of purchasing vehicles, paying off of equipment, that sort of thing is in the best interest to have a long-term contract. And the amount of work in not just the tender process, but onboarding and switching over a new contractor is huge. So we're planning to continue with that same term.
Thank you, Mr. Vieira. I just that 30-70 split with the disposal fees and then the taxation. If we keep this the same service level, will that split still be the same, or is there something more we can recycle to make that more equitable?
So Yes, good question. I guess my first answer would be, as things stand now, that 30-70 split is the way we've budgeted to move forward. Now, there'll be other things that this committee will be considering as we go, for the life of this committee that may impact that. For example, I think we've planning in 2024 to bring reconsideration of our disposal fees to this committee. So it's a user pay system. If we increase fees, potentially would reduce the burden on taxation. So that's just one example.
Any other questions? Nope, seeing none.
Call on Adriana.
Well, thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. Nice to be here. Olivia's just going to get the presentation loaded up for us. So thank you for that great background, Jamie. That sets up what I'm going to dive into really nicely. So as he mentioned, what's in front of you right now is that levels of service document. So I'm going to run through the various points. I'm going to skip over some of the background that you've already received. And I'll pause at the end of each one for discussion and questions. All right, so again, that overview, it's a regional level service. We've got 27 sites in the network, and right now we've got that contract service delivery model that's in place. Typically, it's a 5-year term on that contract, and the current contracts are expiring June 30th of this year. So what we're wanting to do is, prior to the procurement, is establish board approved levels of service at our facilities, and then we can go and procure those approved levels of service. We also feel that this will provide some clarity to the proponents that are interested in the contracts on the service level expectations that are in place, and it will form part of the contracts for the service delivery. And we really want to ensure that this committee and the board of directors are engaged in achieving and maintaining a high level of service for our residents, which meets public expectations, is environmentally responsible, incorporates specific community needs and values, is balanced with the TNRD's corporate and strategic goals, and is in line with the approved annual budget. So quick timeline, the draft financial plan went to the committee of the whole on January 18th and was subsequently also brought before the board, and I believe now it's out for public comment. Right now we're at the February 3rd committee meeting. We'll do our first review of the proposed levels of service. Next, the recommendation would go to the February 23rd Board of Directors meeting. We'll commence procurement and selection between February 27th and March 31st, with a goal of bringing a contract award recommendation to the Board of Directors on April 20th. All right, so what are levels of service? We've been saying that word, but let's talk about exactly what it means. So these are specific parameters that describe the social and economic goals of the community or the regional district, and they include things like safety, customer satisfaction, quality, quantity, capacity, reliability, responsiveness, environmental acceptability, cost, and availability. They also represent service cost trade-offs that are established in a flexible, rational, and transparent manner. And that's why we want to have this discussion with you today. And again, highlighting that the cost to operate this service is a direct relation to the level of service that's being provided to the public. So items that we'll cover in these levels of service is the number of facilities in the network, hours of operation, infrastructure standards, snow removal expectations, facility security, wildlife control, nuisance control, cleanliness and visual appearance of our facilities, bulky goods management, signage that's in place across the network, customer service expectations, supervision and staffing standards that are in place, site attendant wages, health and safety, equipment requirements, scavenging, payment types that are in place, and the scope of services offered at our different facilities. So what is an eco depot or a transfer station? It is where municipal solid waste is dropped off by customers and then loaded into larger bins or trailers and hauled to destination landfill. We have different levels of service at our facilities depending on the service level that's been established for each community. And again, this is a significant component, the operations and maintenance contract of the TNRD's annual budget, and it's an essential service to all TNRD constituents. So what is the contractor responsible for, and what is the TNRD responsible for? The contractor is responsible for all site attendant duties, so providing the site attendant staffing and managing those staff, coordinating the servicing of our stockpiled materials. So these are, if you've been to some of the larger facilities where we have cribs and we store scrap metal, wood waste, extended producer responsibility items like tires and appliances, snow removal, general site operations, and maintenance. TNRD staff are responsible for administering the operations and maintenance contracts to ensure that the service levels are being met and that TNRD procedures are adhered to. We have procedure manuals specific to both eco depots and transfer stations, and the staff and the contractor are expected to follow those procedures. We take care of maintenance and repairs of all facility infrastructure, such as the buildings, the lock block walls, and the roadways. And we coordinate any new capital projects at those facilities as well. All right, so the first item on the list is hours of operation. So these are reviewed every 5 years. The current hours of operations in place were reviewed by this committee in April of 2022 and then adopted by the Board of Directors on May 5th of last year. The review takes into account our hourly customer counts, incoming annual waste tonnage, revenue generated through tipping fees at each facility, site-specific operational concerns. This is addressing issues where we might have issues like traffic congestion, for example, and it also involves community surveys. We want to ensure that we engage with the local community and gather feedback on what hours of operation work for that community. You'll notice in the hours, we do try to have some consistency there, and there are some community hours that are quite different, and those are based on what the community survey results were for that location. The 2022 review recommended a 1-month extension of summer hours at our 7 sites that had seasonal hours in place. So now there's generally more hours in the summer than in the winter. So we added an extra month of summer hours covering the month of October. And the rest of our facilities are all year round, so they don't differentiate between the summer and the winter. This is what the overview of the hours is. And that's in the document just for your reference as well. Any comments on hours of operation before I move on? Okay, thank you. Next is facility infrastructure standards. So these are the things that we're providing at the locations, and they include all facilities having a site attendant office, which has electricity, climate control for site attendant comfort and safety, and portable toilet. Noting that the Boston Flats location does have a permanent washroom facility with running water. So that's the photo you see at the bottom. There's a washroom facility in that building. And upgrading facilities to have permanent washroom facilities and running water where feasible is a priority for us. We've included washroom or water upgrades in the 2023 draft budget at the following sites: Blue River, Clearwater, and Lower Nicola. Of course, eco depots and transfer stations involve the dropping or pushing of garbage down into a bin or a trailer. All of these bin or trailer drop-off areas have safety railings in place that meet occupational health and safety standards to ensure worker and public safety. Railings must remain in place and locked at all times, with the exception of being opened for self-dumping vehicles or to assist customers in unloading bulky items as per our site attendant manual. All of the sites, or the eco depots, the buildings have sufficient clearance to accommodate a vehicle that can enter the building and then actually use its self-dumping box to unload the material. I wanted to show you a few of our different railing systems that are in place. So this is a standard railing system at a basic transfer station. So those railings, the middle one opens so that you can put material between, but of course we advise that they're locked unless they are required to be open. This is a bit of a different railing system. This is in place at the Eco Depot sites where we have a tipping pad in place. So in this setup, the customer would back up to the edge of that pad, not up onto it, so that they can't fall into the bin. They shouldn't be backed up onto the pad in their truck unloading because they could face risking falling into the bin, which we do not want. And those railings can open up as needed. And then inside the Eco Depot buildings, we have a sliding rail system. And at these facilities, residents don't actually, or customers don't really go close to this side of the building. There's a line near the front, and they just have to back up to that line and then place their material right on the tipping pad. And the operator will then push it all into the trailer when there's enough material on the ground to do so. So continuing on with the facility infrastructure standards, we maintain the roadways so that the sites are accessible by two-wheel drive passenger vehicles year-round. This includes grading the roads when required, doing pothole repair, doing annual dust control, snow clearing, and sanding and de-icing when it's required. And then also mentioning that all of our facilities have internet connections available, which is required for communication with the site attendants, and to operate our ticketing and billing software. So that's been something that's changed actually since 2021. At our transfer stations, they previously were offline using a paper system to record charge accounts and just using the punch eco card system. And now all the sites are processing transaction on a handheld device, and they can take those reloadable eco cards in addition to punch eco card for payment. And it allows them to do tickets for charge account customers directly instead of having to fill in a piece of paper and then mail that into our office. And for us, we have a lot better data now on what's going on in the network now that we have all of that information electronically. Any questions or comments on facility infrastructure standards before I move on to snow removal? Oh, yes, Jamie.
Just to add to the discussion or the comments about the safety railings, one of the reasons, we have that built into this standard that we want sort of adopted by the board is that was, even though it seems straightforward to have safety railings, it was a very controversial thing when they were first installed, because it was a change of how people unloaded their vehicle. It was more of a pain in the butt to have to put your garbage over or through the railings instead of where you used to be able to just back up and just drop it straight into the bin. And now, generally speaking, in the province, there was no safety railings until the mid-2000s when there was an incident at the city of Kamloops landfill, actually, which precipitated safety railings being installed at all of these sites across the province within a year or two following that incident. So just a bit of history.
Yeah, that's a good point. It was contentious at the time. But so far, I don't think we hear too much about complaints on railing systems anymore. So everybody's adjusted, which is good. All right, snow removal. So the TNRD will ensure snow removal and sanding or de-icing is completed prior to the posted hours of operation for all areas of the site used by customers, attendants, or contractors. And it's expected that records are kept of all snow removal work. Snow clearing area. This includes roadways, the tipping pads in front of bins or trailers, clearing off the bin lids. So the 50-yard bins, they open like this. So you have to clear the snow off of the tops. Parking areas where the staff park, the weigh scales and the scale ramps, the recycling collection areas, and also outside the front gate to ensure that the gates can open properly. If there's any snowfall accumulation greater than 2 centimeters, this does require snow removal. And any snowfall that's under 2 centimeters may be managed with sanding or de-icing as required to maintain a safe location for workers and customers. All facilities will have an available stockpile of sand salt mix to be applied as needed to keep the site safely accessible to staff and to the public. And in the event of freezing rain or extreme snow accumulation, where it's not possible to provide safe access ahead of the posted hours of operation, the facility may remain closed until snow removal or sanding or de-icing has been completed. So here's a picture of our recycling area. This is looking ready for customers. The snow's been cleared and there's been material applied to prevent slips and falls. Here's a lovely looking roadway, also ready for customers, nicely treated. And I did take out the Lewis Creek picture. We did have some challenging conditions this year when we had that thaw freeze cycle, which created some very icy conditions at the site, which was challenging to manage. Are there any comments or questions on snow removal expectations?
I have my hand up. Can you hear me? I have my hand up.
Go ahead, Director Skamer.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through the chair to Adriana. That's one of my concerns. You know, you kind of sugarcoated that pretty nicely on, you know, what the Eco Depot in Lewis Creek and the conditions of such. And I'm actually uncertain if the safety standards can be maintained unless, is it possible to have financial penalties work into these standards that we're talking about? Because quite frankly, that whole scenario should never have happened in the first place. And just because you guys, everyone has done a pretty good job of determining what that service level should be and the safety levels that it's supposed to be, when that is not being maintained, there should be significant penalties and there should be ways for us to fix it very quickly, not like a week later. And so I'm not entirely sure, you know, I don't have a copy of the contract, but even some of these other things that we're asking for them to maintain, should there be financial penalties if it isn't brought up or isn't at our acceptable standard?
I could comment on that, Chair. Thanks for your comment. Yes, I guess I can explain how the current contract's set up and how we'd anticipate the future contract to be set up. We typically don't have penalties. The challenge with penalties is we have to have sort of a penalty incentive is the balance of the way I understand the contracts need to be set up. However, the way we set this up is that if they are failing to perform the obligations of the contract, so we use snow removal as an example, then we have the ability to go ahead and do those or get a third-party contractor to do that work, and they are responsible for the cost. So with the Lewis Creek example, that's actually what happened. You know, I could appreciate that the timing delay was not ideal. It took way too long for this to happen, but ultimately what happened is we, the TNRD staff, coordinated a third-party contractor to do the sanding, and now that cost is on the contractor to pay that third-party cost. So that's the incentive that's built in for any sort of failures. And the snow removal is just one example. Any failure. So for example, if they fail to haul the bins on time and the garbage was overflowing, we would, and we have done this before, we take steps to hire a third-party roll-off bin company to haul that bin for them, and then they are obligated to pay that additional cost, or essentially it gets taken off their bill, the cost that we incur.
So if I may, as a second question, Jamie, is then where are the standards when we talk about potholes and that sort of thing? Who determines what that level is? Is it already pretty much set in stone? Is there a fair amount of discretion in there? You know, like obviously you want to have a good working relationship with the contractor and you don't want to be nitpicking, but where is there opportunities for improvement in the contract? And how do you see going forward in that process, like in being able to continually improve?
And sorry, I missed the first part. Did you say potholes?
Yeah, as an example. You know, I mean, we've got it that potholes will be repaired. Well, what's the length of time? Is it a week, a month, a year? I mean, how do you determine those levels of service?
Yeah, and that's obviously a challenge that we can't dictate, or it's very difficult to have very specific things built into the contract. But I guess I would say, generally speaking, and I'll look to Adriana to add to this, that's the role of our staff. So we have 2 staff that their primary job is to inspect the sites and visit the sites to ensure contract compliance. And then they work, as you say, as you mentioned, they're kind of cooperatively with the contractor to make sure they're complying. So then only if, there's continued non-compliance that we would take the steps that I mentioned, where we bring in a third party to do it.
Okay, and also, if I may, in the previous discussion, they were talking about bathroom facilities. Is that something that we're going to try to do throughout all of these eco depots in a period of time? I see we've got Blue River, Clearwater, and Lower Nicola in this draft budget. Are we planning on doing other ones next year and the year after?
Yes, thank you, Director Stamer. So what we're looking at, because water access is a challenge at many of these facilities, is actually a permanent facility that could hold clean water and black water that would have better storage capacity and require less servicing. So we're just getting that figured out. There are requirements with Interior Health. I believe you do need approval permits on that. So we're working with facilities to do our first mock-up design, and then we'll walk through what that process looks like. And our intent would be to find a successful model and then roll that out to the rest of the facilities as the budget permits over a number of years.
All right, thanks very much for that.
Thank you, Chair. I gather from the comments then that the snow removal aspect is part of the overall contract. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on whether there's any benefit to either breaking that apart or to specifying who that contractor is over the next 5 years. I'm thinking my personal experience up at Sun Peaks, where strata corporations are going to tender every couple of years on snow removal contracts for the opening areas of the condos, and then there's the corp itself. So I'm just wondering if there's any efficiencies in taking apart that snow removal part from the overall contract, or making that contractor who wins the bid specify who the snow removal people are. I don't know if there's a benefit to that or not.
I could start off the answer to that. Thanks, Director Grenier. Where should I start? I'll start on the way we do the snow removal currently. As you noted, the operations contractor is responsible for it. Prior to this contract 5 years ago, we managed that directly with separate contracts. Now, the model of having sort of a single snow removal contractor isn't possible, because simply the distance between these sites they're hundreds of kilometers apart from each other. So on the and I will say we have experienced challenges under this model where the contractor is responsible for it. And so I think it's a good comment that we could take back around the procurement process, that we require maybe a more detailed explanation of their plan for snow removal. Right now, it's just that they're responsible for it and we hold them to task for it. But we've, I will admit that we have areas where we continue to see sort of snow removal challenges because whatever contractor our contractor chooses to subcontract with, or if they try to do it internally with their own staff, that we've seen sort of challenges and having to sort of put pressure on them to improve.
Perhaps as part of that analysis, if we find in year one that the snow removal is not acceptable to our standards, then there may be something in the contract that we could force the retender of the snow removal contract by the contractor. And maybe I know there's issues about penalty clauses, but there might be some repercussions, motivation by the contractor not to find himself in that position that's an option that you have. We don't like this standard, change this part of it, and here's the consequences of that.
I think we could consider building something language and like that into the tender process.
Madam Chairman, I just had a question. How many contractors are we looking at contracting in the regional district? Are we got? Like for how many areas are we contracting out?
Yeah, right now the region's broken down into 3 areas: Thompson Valley, Nicola Valley, and the Western Valley. And we're intending on doing 2 contracts moving forward.
So you're dealing with 2 contractors only? For
Correct.
the whole area. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Director Grenier actually brings up a good point, because I did notice that when we were looking for contractors for the library, we had a little bit of a challenge. So there might be an opportunity to partner with who's ever doing the library sites as well, just as a opportunity.
Generally speaking, snow removal contractors have been very challenging to find, just because of changes in insurance requirements, and it's because it's boom or bust. You pay based on, they only work when it snows. It's a very challenging business model. I guess I'll just leave it at that. So appreciate that. I knew that was an issue in Logan Lake. Yeah.
All right, thank you, everybody. I'll continue on. Our next topic is facility security. So the TNRD will provide and maintain fencing around the perimeters of all facilities with a lockable gate at any entrance point. To ensure compliance with applicable TNRD bylaws and for after-hours security, we have video surveillance systems installed at Clearwater, Lewis Creek, South Thompson, Heffley Creek, Lower Nicola, and the Boston Flats eco depots. We do have some facilities where we experience high levels of after-hours vandalism and theft. And at these locations, we now have live remote video monitoring in place with a live operator talk down feature. And these systems have been highly successful in protecting our assets and decreasing our after-hours shoppers that were causing havoc for many years. We found that this saves money long-term on repair and replacement of damaged property, and really saves quite a lot in staff resources spent on investigating break-ins, exporting video footage and bringing that to the local police detachment. And of course, cleaning up following a break-in. There's usually quite a mess that's left behind. Any comments or questions on facility security standards? Okay. On to wildlife control. The TNRD will ensure that wildlife attractants on site are controlled. This includes the perimeter fencing, which is installed around the boundary of all the facilities, and that's the first defense against wildlife coming on site. We have bear-proof electric fencing, which is installed and active from April to November around our landfill perimeters. So that's Lower Nicola and Heffley Creek landfills. And around the perimeter of the Sun Peaks transfer station, because there's high amounts of bear activity at that location. We have signage in place at all electrified facilities to warn people that there's an electrified fence there and that it could be on. We make sure that the perimeter fencing, the gates, and electrified fencing is all maintained regularly, and that ensures site security. All eco depots and transfer station facilities will either close the building access doors, shut the overstructure lids or the bin lids when the sites are closed to prevent animals from accessing the garbage that's stored in the bins. So that's for bears, rodents, and birds. And of course, garbage must never be stored where it's exposed and can become a wildlife attractant. Any comments on wildlife control? Questions? Okay, thank you. Nuisance control. So of course, managing garbage does have some nuisances, including dust on our gravelly roadways and odors. So the TNRD will control common solid waste nuisances The generation of dust can really be unsightly and irritating to staff and customers. So we complete annual dust control, so once per year, on driving surfaces at eco depots and select transfer stations that do experience those nuisance conditions. And of course, putrescible waste, which is the stuff that can rot in your household trash, can really cause odors if it's left to break down. And this can be very irritating to staff and customers. So we ensure that full trailers and bins are hauled regularly to mitigate nuisance odors, and that full bins and trailers are not stored on TNRD property for longer than 48 hours. We do pressure wash the eco depot buildings annually as well. So that includes the garbage building and the recycling building. We pressure wash the floor, the jersey, concrete barriers, the sidewalls, and then the bottom area where the B train trailer is stored, just to make sure that everything's cleaned out and not causing odors, and to keep the buildings in cleanly condition. Any questions or comments on nuisance control? Okay. This is an aerial shot of the Clearwater Eco Depot after dust control has been completed. So you can see the darker areas there is where the product's been laid down to make sure that the dust doesn't fly around. This is quite a large site to treat. But of course, people don't drive in one path, so we've got to cover it all. Okay, on to facility cleanliness and visual appearance. The TNRD will maintain facilities in a clean and orderly manner to present a positive aesthetic to the public. We make sure that litter is collected regularly on site and from fence lines, so it's not accumulating, that all vegetation is controlled either with chemical or equipment like weed whackers. Site infrastructure and equipment is maintained in good order and should be free from major blemishes, damage, any rust or graffiti. Painted surfaces are regularly retouched as required. So those lovely yellow railings that we saw pictures of, we want those to be nice and yellow and not full of rust. And that waste material stockpiles are maintained in a neat and orderly manner, and that overflow material is not stockpiled on the ground outside of any designated areas. So even though we have these big cribs to store things in, it's our expectation that the tires are stacked neatly, the mattresses are stacked neatly, so that we've got that nice visual appearance to the public. So that's the expectation at those stockpiled sites. Here's a nice overview of the Clinton Eco Depot with its, they've got some nice landscaping at the front and everything's looking nice and bright and maintained in an orderly condition. So that's what our expectation is. Any comments on cleanliness and visual appearance? Okay, moving on to bulky goods. So this is related, but committing that the TNRD will segregate bulky goods and materials into dedicated storage cribs or piles. So what this means is that we shouldn't just be picking any place willy-nilly and deciding that we're going to store stuff there. It should be a designated location that's properly set up to receive that material. And you'll typically see we build these cribs with lock block walls. The piles will be properly kept clean of contaminants, and they may accumulate until minimum servicing thresholds are met. So we have contractors that will service our scrap metal piles, wood waste piles. They'll typically do a run where they service several sites, and they do require that we have a minimum amount of material stockpiled before they come out and do the servicing. So once those stockpiles on site, if they're growing, at sites that don't have permanent equipment on site, mobile equipment will be roved around to push those piles up as needed to make sure that the piles are managed properly. And that's part of the duties of the site attendants as well, is to visit customers when they're in those drop-off areas and ensure that the proper material is going into the crib and that it's not being contaminated with non-target materials.
Go ahead.
Yeah, mattresses are collected and then they're shipped down to a facility in Hope called, is it Pacific Mattress? Yeah, that's still their name, where they're disassembled. And then they recycle the scrap metal, and I think they do landfill the fabric and then they process the wood. Yeah, but yeah, they all go to that facility in Hope. Correct, they're free.
Okay, Director Sarai and then Director Stamer.
Just on that, just curious, City of Kamloops has a partnership with Ask Wellness, and we provide a facility on Mission Flats to recycle mattresses and the frames and the metal. And I'm just wondering, would there be a savings there? Are they not capable of taking more?
Yeah, so Ask Wellness, they've been up and down with being able to service us. We find that Pacific Mattress has been consistent, so we do have to haul. And with the amount of mattresses that come in through the city of Kamloops, our mattresses as well may overwhelm them again. Like we had a contract with them years ago, then basically city of Kamloops once they started using them, it overwhelmed them and we all got shut down for a while. So it's as good as a contractor as good as they are, the inconsistency is scary for our needs. So we choose to use Pacific Mattress.
I'll add one last comment on mattresses as well, as it's hopefully soon will be included in the extended producer responsibility regulation, and then it will become a material just like tires and oil where it's being managed by a provincial program. So we're looking forward to that day.
Okay, Director Stamer.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to say that I believe it's very important for us to be able to have these sites in a clean and tidy manner, and the staff has done an excellent job of maintaining that because that is the face of the TNRD. Is there a bit of an issue when it comes to the grinding of the branches and that kind of stuff, like on the bio? Because it seems like that was the biggest challenge in Lewis Creek in the last while, is being able to get rid of that in a timely fashion. Are we seeing that across the board in all the eco depots, or is that just because of the way they bring the machines, and they stage them and it takes quite a long time to get around there? Have you noticed that anywhere else?
With the contractor, we do have minimums and limits that they require, but the problem is no site really fills up consistently. Like one site might be super full, but for them to come out where it's feasible for them as well, the other sites might be not have so much kind of thing. So if we wait for all the eco depots to fill up, some sites might look worse than others. And that's the challenge of getting the contractor in there, because his mobilization costs are quite high. So for him to come in with all his equipment just for one site, he usually likes to milk run and do all of us at the same time. So that would be that some sites fill up bigger than others, like our Lower Nicola, for example, gets really full by the time the other sites get full. And that's just what we're looking at is one of our challenges is knowing that some sites are busier than others now, to evolve these sites by making crib sizes difference, like expanding crib sizes where they can hold more capacity, which definitely helps. So that is in our, what we're planning to do in years to come.
And as a further, are we seeing an increase in that? Because it seems like, we're trying to get away from people burning, as much as we possibly can. Are we seeing a significant increase in that chippable, limbs and trees and that kind of stuff, more so now than in the past?
I would say, from my time here, I would actually say there is a slight increase due to the fact with the fires and just being fire smart, more communities are bringing it into the eco depots to get rid of. So yeah, we do see a little bit more.
All right, thank you.
I'm just curious about the material that is chipped. Where does that material ultimately end up going?
That's the contractor's responsibility is to find a home for that. As of late, there's nothing. The Merritt Cogen plant is also not taking anything right now with the new ownership. They have to be super clean materials, so our wood waste anyway, but the brushes and branches, what we're looking at doing is trying to bring it into our own landfills for some side slope coverage for methane reduction. We're looking at maybe blending it and having static compost piles just at the landfills. So right now there is nowhere to go with it. We had taken it to the Pacific I think they're called Pacific Substrate, over by Cache Creek. New ownership there now as well, and they don't want to take it for free anymore, so they want $30 a ton. So that's changing what we're planning to do with our own material now too.
Director Stamer.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Good discussion, everybody. I'll move on to facility signage. So at all facilities, we will have a sign posted predominantly at the entrance that contains the following information. So it lists the facility name, the owner operator, along with a phone number and address, hours of operation, accepted payment types at the facility, so people see that before they get there, and emergency phone numbers. Separate signs are located on site listing tipping fees for materials that are accepted there. And we also have additional site signage installed where needed to give direction and ensure compliance with applicable bylaws. So these are signs that tell you to keep your children and your pets in the vehicle. That's in our solid waste bylaw, and a number of other signs located across the facilities. And we're just in the process as well. If you're thinking of any sites that might have a decrepit looking entrance sign, we're in the process of replacing those. So we've got quite a few more on the list for this year to get an upgraded entrance sign put in place. Some of them are pretty weathered. Customer service. All facility users will be treated as business customers and shall be treated with courtesy and respect in all interactions. We're expecting positive customer service experiences for the folks who visit our sites. Site attendants will be required to use standard courtesies, assist customers by explaining site rules and regulations when required, provide education on programs when required, and follow TNRD guidelines on dealing with difficult customers if necessary. And I'd like to note that site attendants are not required to assist customers with the physical unloading of their materials. We encourage them, if they have something heavy to unload, that they do bring assistance with them to help. It's not our expectation of the site attendants to unload anybody's vehicle for them. Supervision and staffing. The TNRD will ensure we'll have one or more suitable site attendants on duty during posted hours of operation to ensure that the facility is operating properly, that prohibited waste is not being dumped into the bins, to ensure the site's being kept clean, and to report any necessary issues. All eco depots, with the exception of Blue River, have a minimum of 2 staff on duty. One operates the waste scale and the other one supports the operations outside the scale house and directs customers. At Clearwater, South Thompson and Lower Nicola and Boston Flats, there is a minimum of 3 staff on duty because we have increased customer counts at those locations. And we found that 2 people just couldn't be everywhere they needed to be to properly support the amount of customers coming into those facilities. Each facility should be visited by the contractor's supervisor at least once per month. And then TNRD operations staff complete at minimum a quarterly formal site inspection, in addition to regular site visits to ensure contract compliance and deal with any necessary issues as they arrive. So I can certainly tell you, we usually have a plan for the day or the week, and then all of a sudden that goes out the window because something's happened and we have to send staff somewhere to deal with something. But we do make sure that those quarterly inspections are done, and then they rove around as needed to the facilities. Any comments or questions? Okay. Site attendant wages. Eco Depot and transfer station site attendants typically live within the local community where the site is located. It's often a local person. That's the regular attendant there. These staff are employed by the operations and maintenance contractor, and they're not directly TNRD staff, but we do recognize the benefit of having long-term and committed staff in these roles. And so what we'll do this year is part of the procurement process for awarding the contract will require that proponents disclose the salary and benefit packages offered to their staff. And we may use this information in the evaluation process. Just want to ensure that they're receiving fair wages for their time. Any questions or comments? Okay. Facility health and safety. The TNRD will ensure that facilities are safe for both the public and workers on site. During hours of operation, the contractor is designated as the prime contractor according to WorkSafe BC requirements, and they must have a health and safety plan in place that addresses all workplace risks and hazards. All facilities will have safety equipment required by WorkSafe, which includes but is not limited to eye wash stations, first aid kits, fire extinguishers, and fall protection systems. Eco depots and transfer stations with mobile equipment on site will keep working equipment at least 6 meters away from all vehicles and people on site. And during stockpile processing, all active work areas should be cordoned off to ensure public safety. The wood waste grinding and the yard waste grinding is a perfect example of that, right? We set up a big work area, make sure that nobody's in that zone so that the public remains protected. And then at Thompson-Nicola and Heffley Creek, we have fire suppression water that's available. And this is in 2,000-gallon portable storage tanks, just in case there was a landfill fire that pops up, we can put water on it right away. Questions? Yeah, so at some of our sites, we collect paint, pesticides, and flammable liquids as part of the provincial extended producer responsibility program. So there's training that goes along with accepting those materials, and there's a proper storage area for them to go in. Proper bin or drum that the staff sort out. And then if we have any non-program materials, those are stored in a separate cabinet and serviced by a contractor with the proper training in collecting those materials. And there are some times where we have to reject materials from being dropped off and say, we can't take that here, and recommend where the person can get rid of it safely.
Are we planning on doing any hazardous waste collections again in communities? Or I know there's usually one in Merritt. Is there other communities that are going to have that opportunity this year?
Yeah, so the ultimate goal is that we're working on a year-round facility that will accept materials that are out of scope of those program materials. So for example, if you have a paint, a pesticide, or a flammable and it's not in its original labeled container anymore, you can't drop it off at the Eco Depot. It's outside the scope of that program. Or if it's a material not included, you can't bring it either. We've typically offered 2 hazardous waste roundups per year that have roved around to different communities in order to give people an opportunity to drop those off. But what we would like to do is put a year-round facility in place. We did put out an RFP for that service last year and unfortunately did not get any responses. So we're connecting with the folks that we thought would be interested to see what barriers might have been in place, and we plan on reposting that opportunity. That would likely be in the Kamloops area, but would provide year-round access for anyone to go drop off a material free of charge. Yeah.
So when you, where are the sites that you recommend people take the product to that's not accepted at our facilities?
Yeah, right now we would direct them to either Sumas Environmental in Kamloops is one of the locations. And what's the other one? I think that's the only one that's out right now is Sumas and Kamloops. And they always they need to call ahead and there may be a fee in place for them to drop it off. So what we would like to do is provide a facility where we would contribute the funds to cover the fees for people so that they can drop it off free of charge and put it in the right place and not in the garbage. You're welcome. All right, so I'll move on to equipment requirements. So we have quite a lot of equipment that's part of these contracts and the operations and maintenance of the facilities. So we'll ensure that all equipment that is used is maintained and in good condition. It will be cleaned regularly and free from major blemishes, rust, and graffiti. The equipment should be able to operate in temperatures ranging from -40 to +40 and in all weather conditions, and have a manufacture date of 2013 or newer, or less than 10,000 hours unless approved in writing by the TNRD That's just to make sure that the equipment fits a certain standard that we want at the facilities, and the equipment must comply with all applicable safety regulations. All equipment needs to be equipped with appropriate safety devices like fire extinguishers, mirrors, and audible backup warning devices. And the contractor will provide the TNRD with annual preventative maintenance plans and a replacement strategy for its equipment. So if there's a piece of machinery used in the contract that's going to age out, what's your plan to replace it to ensure compliance? Any comments or questions? I
see
think Ward Director
directors.
Stamer has his hand up.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Just a quick question. On the safety end of things, do we get an opportunity to review any of their on-site safety meetings or anything like that? Do we get any opportunity to see any of that data?
Well, as we designate the contractors to be prime contractor, so it is their responsibility. If we got, from my understanding, we have to be very careful. We need to know that they have the programs in place and we can look at them, but we can't start telling them what to do, or else we put ourselves, I guess, increase the liability on our end. But yeah, we do get copies of all their safety programs. And it is a requirement that they have to supply them to us for sure.
Yeah, but thanks for that, but I'm asking, do they have to also give us a copy of their safety meetings? Because that's a requirement under the WCB that they have to do it, whether it's weekly, monthly, whatever is determined. Do we get an opportunity to see those?
Upon request, we can.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to scavenging. We do not permit scavenging at eco depots or transfer stations, and this is the act of removing items from the garbage or recycling areas to reuse or resell. Unless specifically authorized by the TNRD, no customer or attendant may scavenge anything from facilities. And stockpiles and the tipping floor, these can be dangerous areas that are unpredictable. Like we'll get people that want to climb up the metal pile to grab something or climb into the wood pile to get something. And from time to time, we have quite a bit of material that's stockpiled on the tipping floor. So that's not a safe area for folks to access either. So this poses a liability to the TNRD and to the contractor. So that's why this is not permitted. Any questions or comments? All right, we'll move on to payment types. So we do accept electronic forms of payment where feasible. As Jamie gave you the history, when we first implemented tipping fees, we didn't have any electronic payments in effect. It was only Punch Eco Card, and then our landfill facilities at that time actually took cash. When we built the Eco Depot facilities, we then had the infrastructure in place to put a point of sale machine in and accept debit cards and credit cards in addition to eco cards. We do not accept cash at any TNRD facility. It's a safety concern, and at our sites where there's a single attendant, you're not permitted to take cash through WorkSafe regulations because you're considered working alone and isolated. So our current payment types include eco cards and charge accounts, which are accepted at all facilities. We take debit cards, Visa cards, MasterCards, and eco cards and charge accounts at all facilities that have a weigh scale in place. And then at the facilities that do not have a weigh scale, we can accept eco cards or charge accounts. And we're definitely prioritizing that as new technologies become available, that we would like to install electronic forms of payment at transfer stations. So now that we're using the mobile device to log transactions and we have an internet connection, we'd like to look into accepting cards through that machine. There's ways that you can do that. So that's something that we wanted to look into, and it just gives customers more flexibility on how they pay for their disposal fees. And I'll just highlight here the reloadable eco card. So this system actually allows customers to top up their own eco card instead of having to go down to the local retailer and buy the punch card. So ways that you can top it up include online through the customer portal. So that's a website you log into. You can put in your credit card or your debit card, as long as it has a Visa or MasterCard symbol, and top up your own account. So you can do that anytime you want. You can top it up in person at an eco depot. You can pop into the main office in Kamloops. We can also accept payments through online banking. So you can send an electronic funds transfer over and we can top up your account for you. And you can also send in a check or a money order by mail. So lots of different opportunities. This has been a transition that we started in 2021 now. Time is flying. And we've had pretty good uptake on this. It has been challenging for some folks, but overall we've had positive feedback on this system. I'm not sure if there's comments or questions on it at this time.
I just have one quick comment. So recently I loaded up one of these cards and I was pleasantly surprised to get a $10 welcome from doing that. Yeah, and so I feel that a lot of people don't know that that's available to them and that, you know, it maybe more people would purchase it just for the free $10 of garbage disposal. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great comment. So we have given a $10 welcome credit on the card. So as soon as you sign up for the account, there's $10 on there waiting for you. Gives people a bit of a buffer to get used to it. They can get the card and then go right to the site and drop off a couple bags of garbage. But that's good feedback that maybe there needs to be some more promotion surrounding that. Thank you. All right, I'm not sure if should we take maybe a quick break because I'm about to dive into the service level standards at the eco depots and transfer stations, which is a bit lengthy.
Okay, we'll just take a quick break. Thanks. Okay, everyone is back from the break, so thank you for that, and we'll carry on.
All right, thanks. Hopefully everyone's recharged for this next section and we'll dive on in and hopefully be buttoned up before lunchtime. All right, so what we're going to talk about now is we're going to do an overview of all of the facilities in the network and what different service level those facilities provide. So the first level is Eco Depot with landfill. This is a photo of our Lower Nicola site. I think there's a little, oh, right, the highlighter here. This is the Eco Depot. We call this the front end of the site. And then this back here is the landfill. So the way that this is set up is that the Eco Depot handles all the front end interactions, and then larger traffic is directed to the landfill at the back. So Eco Depot with landfill, we've got Lower Nicola and Heffley Creek. We see an annual cost at these facilities of just about 700,000 up to 1.26 million. The lower end is Heffley Creek, higher end is Lower Nicola. Annual hours of operation available here is between 2,300 and 2,900. And the annual tonnage received, we've got Heffley Creek just under 4,000 ton per year and Lower Nicola at just under 11,000. That number is a little bit high because we had the extra flood debris coming in from the Merritt area. So typically that's more around 9. Staff at these sites varies between 2 and 5. We have less staff at Heffley Creek and more staff at Lower Nicola. So these facilities offer the greatest level of service to commercial and residential customers. They serve as regional facilities, servicing a number of communities and rural areas. They both have dual 80-foot weigh scales. So one's dedicated for inbound traffic, the other's dedicated for outbound traffic. And we see smaller commercial and residential loads going into that front end Eco Depot, and then all the self-dumping trucks, trailers, and bins are all directed up to the landfill facility for burial of the material. And the facilities have a bit different infrastructure that's offered. Lower Nicola has a covered 70 by 70-foot building with a push pit into a B-train trailer, which accepts curbside recyclables from municipal curbside collection programs. And this landfill accepts all Ministry of Environment permitted municipal solid waste, including household garbage and demolition, renovation, and construction material. The Heffley Creek Eco Depot does not have a covered building like Lower Nicola does. It has 8 50-yard bins to receive residential loads and small commercial loads, and all the big traffic is directed to the back. And this facility only accepts demolition, renovation, and construction material due to its proximity to the Mission Flats landfill. And this has resulted in significant cost savings to us and additional lifespan on the landfill, which is important for us. I'll note that both of these facilities do accept asbestos-containing materials, disaster-related debris from flood and wildfire events, as well as clean fill and soil. Excuse me. We have dedicated compaction equipment located at each landfill site and each Eco Depot on the front end for materials management. Bless you. We've got a full suite of diversion opportunities available here. I won't run through the whole list, but it's our maximum amount of programs, and disposal fees, of course, can be paid by electronic means or the EcoCard or charge account. Next level of site is Eco Depots that have buildings. Here's a picture of our South Thompson Eco Depot site. This building here with the doors is for the refuse, and this one here is the recycling building. These facilities include Clearwater, Lewis Creek, South Thompson, and Boston Flats. We see an average operating costs at all those facilities of around $728,000. Annual hours of operation, pretty close, but they vary between about 2,300 and 2,500. Annual tonnage received goes from 681 to 1305. And we have 3 staff working at these facilities. Again, we have higher customer counts there, so we do need that additional staff person. These facilities offer a high level of service to larger population centers. Clearwater, Lewis Creek, and South Thompson, they all have a single 80-foot waste scale for inbound, outbound traffic. So it's got traffic lights on each end and the site attendant controls the flow of traffic going in and out. They have two 70 by 70 buildings with a push pit into a B train trailer for accepting municipal curbside garbage or recycling, plus small to medium-sized residential and commercial loads. They offer large tipping pads for material to be deposited on the ground, either by manual unloading, or you can use a self-dumping truck or trailer to unload. And we'll accept bins or trailers up to 50-yard size, but within operational capacity of the site. So sometimes we could be limited depending on how much room is available in the trailer, but we do try to accommodate as we're able. Mobile equipment is permanently on site at these locations to manage the flow of materials. That's pushing material into the B trains and also managing the stockpiles or for snow clearing when needed. And we accept DRC into separate 50-yard bins. And we're adding some additional bin wall capacity in 2023 at Lewis Creek and Clearwater. And here's an overview of our Clearwater Eco Depot. Thought it'd be good to just highlight facilities you might not have had an opportunity to see. And this is our Lewis Creek Eco Depot. The recycling building is kind of cut off in this shot, but it's located just beside the scrap metal pile over this area. So it's down over here. And then Boston Flats is set up a little bit differently, but we've put it in the same category because of the amount of material that it handles and the type of waste that it can accept. So Boston Flats is the newest facility that we've opened. It replaced the temporary Cache Creek transfer station. It has a 40-foot waste scale and a single enclosed building, which is used for recycling storage, which is in line with our requirements with Recycle BC. It has an outdoor tipping pad to accommodate self-dumping trucks and trailers and bins up to 16 cubic yards. We have on-site mobile equipment that can then push the material into the 50-yard bins, and those are trundled across the highway to the Campbell Hill landfill, which is just across the road on Highway 1. And we've got 9 50-yard bins to receive material at that location. Here is what it looks like. So we've got this kind of front end recycling area where you can stop at the building, unload your recyclables. The cribs that you see here are for material that there's no cost to drop off, but we need bigger storage cribs for it. So we've got yard waste, scrap metal, I think tires and appliances. And here's a close-up view of the tipping pad that we've got installed at that location. This is a lot nicer for people who have this self-unloading versus trying to get into a 50-yard bin up on one of those tipping pads or the smaller pads in front of the bins. Again, we've got a full suite of programs that are offered there, and you can pay fees electronically by EcoCard or charge account. Next, we've got eco depots with B train capacity. I've put capacity because some of them do have a B train and others store 50-yard bins here, but we could put in a B train if we needed to. This is an overview of the Logan Lake Eco Depot. These facilities include Logan Lake, Clinton, and Lytton. We have an average annual operating cost at these facilities of $362,000. Annual hours of operation drop down a little bit from 1590 to 2320. The amount of tonnage that's coming in here goes between 214 tons up to nearly 500. And we have 2 staff that work at these facilities. They offer a high level of service to small and medium-sized communities with a single 40-foot scale for inbound, outbound traffic, B train trailer capacity. And what you saw, there's some more pictures, but there's a hydraulic lid over structure, which allows us to keep any water and snow out of those bins. And we've got that additional capacity with the B train trailer to store material. So it allows us to just collect more essentially before we have to haul it. So there's better efficiencies there. We can accept small to medium-sized loads of municipal solid waste from municipal curbside programs, First Nations bands, and residential and commercial haulers. And then we've got a a series of 50-yard bins that accept demolition, renovation, and construction. We can accept loads up to 16 cubic yards at these facilities, again, within the operational capacity of the site. And we don't have mobile equipment permanently on site at these facilities. It's mobilized when required to push up stockpiles and compact the bins. They offer the full suite of diversion opportunities and same methods of payments as the eco depots. This is the Clinton Eco Depot. It's kind of a bit of a different layout than the other facilities. We're more constrained by space here, but we've made it work. This is the Lytton Eco Depot. So this is a nice shot of that hydraulic lid over structure that's in place. All right, and then we've got kind of our regular Eco Depot. So this would be 70 Mile and Blue River. This is a shot of the 70 Mile Eco Depot facility. The average cost of running these is $179,000 per year. Hours of operation drop down again, down to 832 to 1728. Annual tonnage is 120 tons to 224 tons. And we've got 1 to 2 staff per site. Blue River is 1 staff person and 70 Mile is 2. These offer a high level of service to small sized communities and rural areas with multiple 50-yard bins in place to receive waste. The 70 Mile House Eco Depot has a 40-foot scale in place, while the Blue River Eco Depot does not have a scale and uses volume-based fee schedule. So whatever the size is of your truck or trailer, if you have extended sides and so on, that's how the rates are assessed. The Blue River Eco Depot, we have the curbside program operating in Area B, and that curbside collection truck deposits its waste at the Blue River Eco Depot into a 50-yard bin. And we do try to accommodate loads up to 16 cubic yards again within operational capacity. And we don't require mobile equipment to be permanently on site at these locations either, and it's mobilized as needed. And here's a shot of the Blue River Eco Depot. Bet we wish it was this season right now, or maybe not. And we've got the full suite of recycling and diversion opportunities available as well. Same types of payment, electronic, EcoCard, and charge account, except the Blue River Eco Depot does not currently have a point of sale machine and only accepts Eco Depot or charge account, but we'd like to look into getting an upgrade there. All right, our next category is Transfer Station Plus. This is a photo of the Savinaw transfer station. So you can see there's several bins there for collecting refuse and demolition. And then there's some storage cribs over up here for scrap metal and tires. And we also accept some extended producer responsibility items there. So sites in this category include Knutsford, Loon Lake, Paul Lake, Savinaw, Spence's Bridge, Vavenby, Westwold, and we've included Sun Peaks, which is a bit of a unique site. So the average cost of everybody except for Sun Peaks is $84,000, with Sun Peaks having an average cost of $181,000. This is due to the frequency of hauling that's coming out of Sun Peaks. There's high tonnage there, being a mountain resort municipality. Everybody's there in the winter skiing, so there's a lot of material coming out of that site, nearly 500 tons of garbage per year. Annual hours of operation, 832 to 1904, but definitely a jump with Sun Peaks at 2176, and I'll explain that on the next slide. And we have 1 staff working at these locations. No question?
There's a transfer station at Koshana on the reserve. I just had a question around, do we still pay for the total operation of that, even though it's on the reserve, or we got some sort of an arrangement for the cost sharing?
Yeah, that facility is operated by the Upper Nicola Indian Band, and they're responsible for 100% of the cost to operate that facility. We do have TNRD residents that use that facility, and so we do pay them. We have an agreement with them where we pay them for TNRD residents to be able to access the site. You're welcome. Other questions?
many of your slides are now showing tonnage, and the thought came across my mind about, is this contract that we're about to negotiate related in any way to tonnage moved and received? And second to that, in the area that we have daily or weekly pickup. And is there a tipping point, pun intended, that it would make sense to pick up weekly instead of expand the size and operation of these facilities? If you have any comments on that.
I could comment on the tonnage one. So the answer is yes, we do have the hauling related to tonnage. So the hauling rates in the contract are based on a rate per ton. So the incentive is the contractor ensures that their staff at the site are maximizing tonnage in the bins. They're paid based on that. If for most parts, there's a few exceptions where it's a flat rate, but in general, it's based on tonnage. On the curbside collection piece, are you suggesting that we would switch to collection opposed to the transfer station model?
I'm just wondering if you've looked at the frequency of people driving their garbage to these facilities every week and the staffing levels and the size of the facilities. You can see the Savinaw facility is much smaller than some of the other facilities. And I'm just wondering, is there a tipping point where you would say, yeah, well, it's easier to go pick up the garbage along the street because there's enough people, and that goes directly to the landfill as opposed to one of these facilities?
Short answer is no, we wouldn't do that. Though all our curbside collection would be a separate service. So if an area wants collection, then we would look at that as a separate service establishment. And one of the reasons why we couldn't eliminate the transfer station by having curbside collection is really just the hauling distances. So curbside collection vehicles aren't designed for long haul. So we would still, for the most part, be required to then reload at a transfer station. I'll use something like Clinton, for example. The municipality of Clinton doesn't do curbside collection. There's some private contractors, but the majority of residents drive their own garbage to the site. If there was a garbage truck there in Clinton, it still wouldn't be economically or operationally feasible for that garbage truck every day they collect to drive all the way to landfill in Cache Creek. Just because the way those trucks are designed to operate, it would still have to go to the Clinton transfer station or Eco Depot to be reloaded to end up go into a landfill that mechanism. That's clear enough, or any comments?
Well, I would just add that there's a lot of materials people still need to get rid of that aren't handled in the curbside program. So you would still need a transfer station and you would still need somebody to be manning that transfer station. Right, so at Savinaw, we've got the curbside program operating, but we've got people in there constantly with metal, yard waste, demolition, renovation, construction, which shouldn't go into your curbside bin, which is just out of the scope.
And I would add that generally speaking, in our experience, that people who live in rural communities prefer making their own schedule of when they bring their garbage in than having curbside collection. I'll use Area J for an example. When we launched the Area J curbside collection going on almost 15 years ago now, the intent was actually to have it in Lac Lejeune as well. But in that area, the residents opposed that and preferred to fund the continued operation of the self-serve transfer station, if you will, instead of having a scheduled pickup.
Okay, we have one more comment and question. Yep.
Thank you. Is there a mechanism in place where we can get a further breakdown on the stations within our area? Like, those numbers are fairly vague and rather spread out as to what the tonnage is in recyclables and what the tonnage is in garbage and metal, so that we as a community can maybe look at areas of improvement. And are the bins going out? Are they actually compacted because you don't have equipment on site, or are they fluffed as they're leaving?
Yeah, we do have that data, and I don't think there'd be an issue providing site-specific information. So yeah, I can get you the numbers that you'd be interested in seeing. And we don't have equipment that's on site all the time to compact those bins. So part of what the site attendant does is they assist with how things are unloaded. So can you put this over here in the bin, right, to try to maximize the amount of material that's there. And they're of course in communication with the hauling contractor as well to make sure that bin's only hauled once it's actually full. Yeah. So if you let me know what sites you'd like the information on, I can send that to you. Just Clinton? Okay, yeah, absolutely. Okay, other comments? All right. Okay, so at the transfer station plus locations, these offer a medium level of service to small size communities and rural areas where we've got multiple 50-yard bins in place and different levels of diversion opportunities. So at the eco depots that I've talked about previously, that had what we'll call the full suite of diversion and recycling. And at these facilities, there'll be different levels of programs offered between the facilities. So these sites can accept small residential and commercial loads within the operational capacity of the site. We use a volume-based fee schedule to assess the fees. There's no weigh scales at these sites. The amount of bins that are there will vary between 2 and 5, depending on the location. And we have capacity to accept commercial cardboard at locations where that's required as well. Most material here is manually unloaded and we'll give pre-approval on self-dumping trucks and trailers just to make sure that we're not overwhelming the capacity of the site and keep a control on the flow of material. And again, mobile equipment is not required permanently and is just mobilized when needed to manage stockpiles or do compaction from time to time. So I will go through the programs that are offered here. So we'll have yard waste, commercial cardboard, scrap metal, household appliances, propane tanks, automotive and household batteries, used oil, which includes filters and containers, antifreeze, tires, clothing donation bins, and of course, household recycling, which is packaging and printed paper. Disposal fees can be paid by EcoCard or charge account. We don't have electronic payment in effect at these locations. And then I mentioned that the Sun Peaks transfer station is a bit of a unique setup. So this is a unique level of service where the TNRD's regional solid waste service is covering the cost of operating that transfer station for 5 days a week, 8 hours per day year round, which is in line with other facilities in similar sized communities. And the resort municipality of Sun Peaks actually requested additional days and hours at that facility where they pay directly for the additional hours that they wanted. And this is through a memorandum of understanding between the TNRD and the municipality. So the site is open for an additional 2 days per week during the winter, meaning it's open 7 days a week. And they also wanted it to be open Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and New Year's Day. So they're fully covering the costs there. They also pay 100% of the tipping fees so that customers don't need to pay disposal fees when they drop off their material. There are so many tourists coming through that to get everybody to get an eco card just is really not feasible. So they said, you know what, we'll cover the costs and it's just free for people to drop off. So that material goes directly to Mission Flats, the TNRD pays the city, and then the TNRD rebills the municipality for those loads. And this site only accepts household garbage and household recycling along with commercial cardboard. There's no additional material that can be dropped off here. And then I thought I would just show you what some of these sites look like. So this is the Knutsford transfer station. You can see the scrap metal pile just kind of peeking out in the upper corner there. This is the Loon Lake transfer station with some small cribs as well. We've got our Little Fort transfer station. And then we've got kind of our lower level of transfer station. We'll call it the budget transfer station option, as Karen referred to it earlier. And these facilities include Agate Bay, Aspen Grove, Black Pines, Brookmere, Egan Lake, Lac Lejeune, Little Fort, and Tronc Hill Valley. The average cost of operating these facilities is $34,000 per year. Drop down in annual hours offered, it's between 208 and 416, and the annual tonnage received is quite small. The smallest being 5.9 up to 78 tons, and there is one staff person working these sites. They offer a, oh, yeah.
I have heard a couple concerns that the Tronc Hill Valley use it or lose it sort of thing. Are we looking at some of these transfer stations and saying we might be considering closing them, or are we happy with them?
Thank you. There is no intent to close any of the facilities that I've covered today. Yeah. All right, so these transfer stations offer a basic level of service to small size communities and rural areas. Typically, they just have double 50-yard bin capacity. They accept small residential and very limited commercial loads within the operational capacity, because we generally have 1 or 2 bins we can accept material into. So I think standard, weekly bagged household garbage is what's going in there predominantly. The tipping fees are assessed using the volume-based fee schedule. There's no waste scale, of course. And typically we don't accept, I shouldn't say typically, we don't accept DRC at these facilities. That material needs to go to a facility that has the losing my train of thought, would need to go to a facility that just has a dedicated storage bin for that material. So we're only accepting household. And we don't require mobile equipment at these locations. They're not stockpiling any material, and generally household garbage doesn't require additional compaction for hauling efficiencies. When you haul it when the bin's full, it's all pretty settled. And we do offer basic household recycling at those sites for printed paper and packaging, but there's no additional recycling programs that are offered. Disposal fees can be paid with EcoCard or charge account. So we do have some small commercial customers that might come in, like a local park, for example, and they would use a charge account to pay for their disposal fees. And this is our Lac Lejeune transfer station. This is an old photo now. We've actually made an exciting upgrade to this facility, so I'm excited to show you a new picture, hopefully next time we see each other again, where we have linked the upper and the lower area using a ring road that comes around on this side now. When we did that hours of operation review, we had a lot of congestion happening at this site. People would drive to that upper area and they ended up being lined up all the way out of the site and sometimes onto the road. So Kern and his team worked hard to get a road put in there, and that's had really positive results on traffic flow at that facility. This is our Aspen Grove transfer station. So just 2 little bins there. It's probably a pile of stuff left over from free dump day over in the corner. We've got our Black Pines transfer station. This one I'll be excited to show you a new picture of as well. Utilities is doing a water upgrade down below. And as a result, we'll be getting a ring road in this facility as well, which will really improve traffic flow. And we've got our Egan Lake transfer station. And that is all. Thank you. Can I take any questions or comments?
Thank you, Adriana. And I apologize if I missed something, but you talked about the eco cards, and because I'm from Kamloops, I'm trying to just find out. So can anybody buy an eco card is my first question. And the second question is your tipping fees for disposal. When's the last time they were adjusted, and what are they? I didn't see them anywhere in the report.
Thank you. So first question, yes, anybody can buy an eco card. We have a few retail locations in Kamloops where folks can get them, although we haven't, now that we're switching to the reloadable card, we haven't replenished all the inventory. So some retailers might still have them, but not everybody. But they can sign up through our website and we'll send them a card in the mail if they'd like one. And then tipping fees, the last time we adjusted the rates, I believe was in 2018, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And our rates are the same as City of Kamloops for household garbage, 80 per ton. we're 160 per ton for commingled DRC, which Kamloops just put theirs up to 200, I believe. So that's one of our projects this year, is to review the rates, have a look. And then, as Jamie mentioned earlier, looking into a fee increase in 2024 on some of the waste streams.
Thank you for that. And that was one of my concerns, is having comparable, so you don't see someone shopping for where to get rid of their disposable and finding it cheaper. So in a bigger picture, you don't need to be living in a district outside to use the eco depots. You don't have to show your ID if you live in that area. So you could.
That's correct, with the exception of some of the alternative waste sites, which are for local residents only. So that's Lac Lejeune, Black Pines, Tronquil Valley, and Brookmere. And that's because those are alternative waste services. But that being said, we don't ask for ID if you go there, but.
And I got one thing to add to that. So our Heffley Creek site, we have a lot of residents of Kamloops living in Rayleigh and Heffley Creek that use that facility. And actually on the costing portion, we have an operating agreement with the city of Kamloops where they contribute into the solid waste budget specifically to compensate for that use of Kamloops residents. So no, we don't turn them away. They pay the same fees, and then we cover off the back end with that service agreement between TNRD and the city.
I just had a question around the Boston Flats, the excess land that was purchased. If I remember correctly, if we wanted that site, they insisted that we buy the whole piece of property. Are there any plans or anything as how we can take advantage of doing something with that land and getting some of the money back?
I can take that one. I know we just recently did a land analysis for all of our owned TNRD owned assets, including that one as well. And we'll have that information that we can share with the board at some time to see if there's something the board chooses to do as far as maybe perhaps selling it or doing something different with it. But from my understanding, I don't think there's any need from a solid waste standpoint. They don't need that extra space. We have the space that we need.
Okay, we have Director Grenier and then Director Smith. Graham, sorry.
They're very useful presentation, lots to think about, but are there any options that you would propose to this committee to control the cost in this upcoming contract? And if you don't have any now, maybe you can come back to us with one or two ideas that would have a significant benefit that we could consider.
As in changes to the current structure, is that what you're suggesting?
Well, originally you had talked about hours of operation, and I'm not suggesting that we cut back hours of operation, but there might be some thing that you're aware of in this grand scheme of things, that if we delayed this or if we deferred this, it might have an impact on this contract that we're about to enter into, or anyways,
Yeah,
you're familiar with it, and I'm
Right.
just wondering, maybe for our benefit, you could propose one or two things that you thought might significantly alter this direction.
Yeah, so I guess the answer is no, that we're not proposing any changes. And that what we're presenting is the service levels as they are and how we are recommending they continue. So if we were to be directed to look for service costs, we would be going back through everything we just covered. And those are the opportunities. I mean, yes, we could reduce hours, we could reduce number of facilities, we can reduce services that would reduce our cost. And as I talked about in our introduction, we work through in, quite a good level of detail with this committee over the years about what services we want to implement, what the cost implications of those are, and that those type of things will continue to come to this committee. So no, we're not recommending any changes in service to reduce cost at this point, as we haven't been directed by the board to, to try reduce costs on solid waste. So.
Okay, we have Director Graham, sorry. And then Director Stamer on.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on Brookmere. I noticed that, that I think I've seen the hours per year, but how many days a week, how many hours a day, that sort of thing. Do you have that information?
Yeah, Brookmere is open 4 hours every Sunday,
Just
year
some-
round.
Okay,
Yeah, only Sunday.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Director Stamer, you're up.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. This is a question to Jamie. Jamie, where do you anticipate, with the RFP going out, where do you think the numbers are gonna be? Like, you know what, if we're not gonna be changing really our service levels, but of course, you know, fuel's gone up and wages have gone up. So do you have any indication of what you're probably gonna be looking at, depending on who, does, submit a proposal?
I'm going to give a really vague answer to that because we're obviously going to go through a competitive process. Generally speaking, as you just mentioned, we're, expecting increased costs due to fuel and inflation of all sorts of things and equipment. I will comment that every time we've gone through this process, there's a lot of interest and we have quite a few very competitive bids. So I would say I'm hopeful that because there's going to continue to be a lot of interest and that will keep our costs manageable. That said, in the budget that was already presented to the board, we have anticipated some costing increases due to expected inflation.
Okay, and as a second, if I may, any other impacts with Recycle BC? Can you see anything coming down the pipe that's going to negatively affect us in that?
Good question. I might put this to Adriana. I'll start off the answer. We don't anticipate changes in Recycle BC as you're aware, Director Samer, we've been as the regional district lobbying for the Recycle BC to include other materials, specifically commercial materials that would reduce our operating costs. We don't, as much as we want, I don't anticipate any movement on that anytime soon. And regarding revenue for Recycle BC, we do receive revenue from the material we are collecting. I don't know. I'll put it to Adriana if we're expecting any change in that. So no, we're not expecting any change in our revenue.
All right, thank you.
Are there any more questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Your presentation was very thorough and informative and appreciated. Thank you.
If I may, Madam Vice Chair, just to interrupt for a sec. We had an issue, a glitch with our agenda software, and so you're not seeing, I think some of you are not seeing that there's actually a recommendation for the committee, which I can read out. So it should be that the committee recommend to the Board of Directors that the solid waste facility levels of service be adopted.
Move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
So moved. Yeah. Okay, so we do have some correspondence that was submitted to us from Recycle BC. Do we move to accept it or just?
Yeah, you don't have to, but if Jamie wants to speak to it, or if anyone has any questions about it,
Yeah,
it's just for information.
it's really there for board, I think yesterday's agenda.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's the response letter to the letter that was sent from the TNRD board, signed by the chair, raising concerns about the Recycle BC draft stewardship plan. And so the response basically says, thanks for your comments, we'll take into consideration.
Okay, now we'll open up for any new business. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on and adjourn the meeting. Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thanks.
You probably did better than